Good day, everybody. This is Kevin Hogan, author of 22 books, now published into 41 or more languages around the world. Today is hypnotic storytelling. This is video 5, bypassing critical thought. Bypassing critical thought. In order to bypass critical thought, you have to use story. In order to use story effectively, we must be able to create quick identification with someone and be able to see ourselves in their shoes so we can identify with them, resonate with them, know that they're really just like us. It was 1998, and I was doing a presentation this day on the psychology of persuasion at the Open U in Minneapolis. The Open U is an adult education facility, not community education that are held at the schools, but an adult facility that's a for-profit organization. And I really enjoyed teaching there back in the late 90s and early 2000s. It was a lot of fun, and it was very good for business. Today, we've got about 25, 30 people in the audience. It's a beautiful day outside. It's about 27 degrees. It's nice. The streets are all cleared. A couple of weeks ago, there was a really bad snowstorm, but not today. Today's a good day. Hey, you know what? It's really cool is Dottie Walters is in town. Dottie, now, this is 1998. This is what, 15, 16 years ago? So Dottie Walters, now you should know, worked for the Reverend Dr. Reverend Norman Vincent Peale back in the 50s and 60s, I believe it was, and he was pretty well known. He wrote The Power of Positive Thinking and some other really cool books that I really liked a lot. And Dottie went on, after she worked for Dr. Peale, to develop one of the largest speakers bureaus in the world. And I was always sort of like a big fan of Dottie's. Now Dottie was, when she was in Minneapolis this day, I'm just going to guess that she was 70, 73 years old, something along those lines. She was a pretty mature woman, and she was just still had energy, though. I watched her in the hallway. I'm just getting ready to start my presentation. I watch her in the hallway, and she's carrying stuff. She's got her son carrying stuff behind him and all that, and they go into their room, and I go into mine, and I keep thinking to myself, I'm going to teach all day, but I got to go and meet this person today. All I wanted to do was give her a copy of the Psychology Persuasion. And I knew she was going to be there because I saw her competing against me in the catalog that day. She's got her page 1 thing, and I've got like my page 3 thing as for promotion out of the 60-page catalog. And she always would beat me as far as, drawing numbers back in those days and all that kind of stuff. But this time, I wanted to talk to her, and I'd never gone up and said hello to her before. So after my presentation's over, I finish at the same time that she does. We both finished around 4 o'clock that day. And I went to the back of her room, and I had brought a copy of the Psychology of Persuasion with me. And I was sitting there signing it, to Dottie, thanks for everything. And because she was such even though I never knew her, I'd read her book, Speak and Grow Rich, and I had subscribed to her magazine for a long time, and I was very familiar with her work, saw her videos, heard her audio programs, and she was just a big inspiration to me. And knowing that she could make it and do really, really well was great inspiration to me. I thought, gosh, if Dottie can do it. And of course, now she got to work with Dr. Peale early on, so she had a great role model. That's something I never really had. But nevertheless, making in the 70s as a woman in the Speakers Bureau business, no easy thing. And she developed one of the biggest, if not the biggest in the world. So I'm sitting there waiting in line. I'm the last person. The last person in line is always that person who's going to talk the longest and take up the most of your time. And that's like, they know they're being considerate by letting everybody else go first, but they also know they want to monopolize your time as much as possible. Well, that was me that day. So anyway, so at the end I walked up and I said, hey Dottie, I just wanted to let you know I'm Kevin Hogan. I'm always over here next door. I didn't get to see you present today. Of course, I've seen you many times on video on your DVDs or your videos, VHS, and just love your work and thank you for everything. You've been a great inspiration to me, and I signed this copy of the Psychology of Persuasion for you. This is a book that came out about 18 months ago, and I just wanted to let you know how important you were to my career, because I'm just getting started as a speaker now. I've only been doing this for a couple of years, but it's because of you, and thank you so much. I appreciate it. And she says, well, thank you, honey. And she looks at the book and she opens it and says, to Dottie, thank you for being such an inspiration. Love, Kevin Hogan. And she looked and she said, well, she says, you're going to do great. And I said, well, thank you very much. I do have one question for you. I go, I've been at $2,000 a presentation for a little while now, but I haven't really been able to break out of that. And I'd like to go to a higher dollar figure in what I charge corporations when I go and talk to them. Because I do have the framework now. I mean, I've done some $2,000 gigs, but I've never gotten more. And I really don't know what to do. And what is the next step? And she looked up at me, and she was about 5 feet, maybe 5'1". And she looked up at me like this, and she says, well, honey, have you asked? And I said, I'm sorry? And she said, honey, have you asked? Have you asked for more than $2,000? Now, she's holding a copy of the Psychology of Persuasion. I'm feeling really sheepish right now. And I looked down at her and I said, well, no, I haven't. And she says, well, honey, she says, just ask. They'll pay you. She says, just ask. You'll do okay. And she looked at the book, and then she looked up at me and smiles. She says, really? And she showed me the cover of my book, right? The Psychology of Persuasion, How to Persuade Others to Your Way of Thinking. And I thought, oh man. I said, well, I was frozen in time for just a moment. And I said, thank you very much for talking to me. I really appreciate it. You're just the best. I wanted to give her a hug, but I didn't. It didn't feel appropriate at the time. But she was so cool. And so I got in my car and brought all the stuff, and I'm driving back home, and I'm thinking, man, oh man, I can do this. All I got to do is ask. Within days, maybe it was less than 10 days, the phone rings, and I'm sitting there with a terrible cold and a sore throat, and you know, you pick up the phone, and it was a local corporation, and they said, yeah, Kevin Hogan, yeah, that's me. Yeah, hey, listen, we saw you in one of the course catalogs here locally. What do you charge for full day events nowadays? Well, I was charging $2,000 a day, right? But this little voice on my shoulder, this little Dottie Walters voice said, just ask, honey, ask. And I said, $4,000 is a daily fee now, $4,000. And he says, well, he says, that is about $1,000 out of our budget, but I'll take it up with our meeting, our planners, and see if, you know, we're able to pull that off for you. Listen, have yourself a good day. Hope you feel better there, Kevin. And I hung up the phone, and I went back to bed, and I laid in bed, and I thought, oh my gosh, $3,000 would have been just fine. I could have done, that would have been awesome. That would have been $1,000 more than I'd ever been paid before. Oh my gosh. But just ask, honey. And I thought, oh man, but we all know what callback for approval means, right? I mean, it means it's just not going to happen 99% of the time. About a week later, I had forgotten all about the event because obviously they're not going to call back. Except for this day, they did call back. Hey, Kev, we just wanted to let you know we got approval from the meeting planning people on your $4,000 for you. We're going to bring in, can you come in March and do that for us? We'd love to have you for a day on the Psychology of Persuasion. That would be just fantastic. I couldn't believe it. Just ask, honey, just ask. And that was the beginning of the next step of my career. Now, how does this bypass critical thinking? Let's just, story goes to the side. How does this bypass critical thinking? Let's go through our 8 steps to see if we got past critical thought. Because once you get past critical thought, that means the critical factor has been pretty much erased. It's eliminated. It's not doing its job anymore. And now the story is going to bring the message to you without critical thought reactance or resistance, right? Number 1, could you see yourself in my shoes? You probably could. You could see yourself many times underselling yourself and going, oh man, that's a lot of money to ask, and I'd be thrilled just to have the $2,000 job today. That would be great, right? You can see yourself. Now maybe it's not that, maybe it's more money or less money, but you can see the concept of you asking for more money because this is the first time you've done it and feeling uncomfortable. Number 2, can you identify with my situation? My situation is the fear that I'm feeling inside of asking for more when I would be totally okay with the $2,000 that I was getting, and yet I had been given advice to do something, and I knew it would probably pay off eventually if I did it. I would have no idea that it would pay off this time, but eventually I knew that it would. Well, sure, you can identify that. Can you identify that sometimes you're going to fail and sometimes you're going to succeed in life? Well, sure you can, because you saw me fail in a conversation with Dottie. You know that here I wrote the Psychology Persuasion, How to Persuade Others to Your Way of Thinking, and yet I wasn't able to persuade people to pay me more than what I was currently getting paid without getting advice from a mentor, right? Okay? And then Did you believe that anything that I did in this conversation, in my experience in the story, is something that you also would have been able to do? Would you have been able to, teach a class for 30 people? Of course. Would you have been able to go and talk to somebody at the back of the room that day? Of course you would. Would you be able to answer the telephone and say a bigger number than you currently do? Of course you can. And because of all of these things, you have critical thinking erased. Number 5, did I talk down to you at any time in the story? This is so important. And once again, no, you and I are just like living in the same world here. And then what about self-deprecating humor? Well, of course, because she looks at the book and then she smiles up at me and she doesn't say it, but she could have said it, right? She could have said it, right? She could have. So yes, the self-deprecating humor is there. I was able to make a little bit of lightness of myself, right? And then, did you experience the fear and the uncertainty with me, knowing that I didn't know if I should talk to her? And then the fear of actually asking live in person, to like somebody, a client or something like that. Did you feel that fear and uncertainty? Of course you did. You knew it was there. And that's something that we've all experienced. And then finally, is the lesson transferable? Can you take the lesson of what happened to me and make it happen in your life? Well, of course you can. You now get paid X dollars for whatever it is you can do, and you can get paid X plus 1 if you just ask, honey, ask. Bypassing critical thinking. Those are the 8 steps that are absolutely necessary to bypass critical thought.